Have you ever felt like a complete failure? Like no matter how hard you try, nothing works out. Maybe you've started a business that crashed. Maybe you've tried to lose weight 5 different times and gained it all back. Maybe you've set goals on New Year's Day, only to abandon them by February. If that sounds familiar, if you've ever looked in the mirror and thought, I'm just not capable of success, then this story is for you. Because once there was a 41-year-old man named David who had failed at everything he'd ever tried until one single decision changed the entire trajectory of his life. The same principle that turns serial failures into unstoppable achievers. Stay with me until the end, and if this resonates with you, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, because we're about to dive into a transformation that will make you rethink everything you know about failure. In a modest suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, in a rental house he'd lived in for 8 years because he couldn't afford to buy, there lived a 41-year-old insurance claims adjuster named David Reynolds. David had what most people would call an unremarkable life. He had a stable job that paid the bills but barely. He had a wife, Jennifer, who worked as a nurse and quietly carried more than her share of the financial burden. He had 2 teenage daughters who loved him, but didn't respect him the way they respected their mother. But every single day, David woke up with a weight in his chest that felt like a stone. The weight of knowing he was capable of more, but had never achieved it. The weight of being 41 years old with nothing to show for it, except a string of spectacular failures. His daily routine was monotonous. Wake up at 7 a.m. feeling already defeated. Shower while replaying yesterday's mistakes. Eat breakfast alone because his wife left for her hospital shift at 6 a.m. Drive 35 minutes to an office where he processed insurance claims for car accidents, house fires, and medical bills. Sit in a gray cubicle under fluorescent lights. Eat lunch at his desk, usually fast food that made him feel sluggish. Process more claims. Drive home in traffic. Arrive home at 60:30 to daughters who barely looked up from their phones. Eat dinner that Jennifer had prepared before her shift. Watch TV until he fell asleep on the couch. Wake up at midnight, drag himself to bed, and repeat. But the routine wasn't what haunted David. It was the history. The failures that defined him. Failure number 1. At 23, fresh out of college with a business degree, David and his best friend Mike had started a landscaping company. They'd invested $15,000 and bought equipment, printed business cards. They lasted 4 months before running out of money. David had to move back in with his parents, broken, humiliated. Failure number 2. At 27, he tried to become a real estate agent. He studied, passed the exam, joined a brokerage. In 18 months, he sold exactly 2 houses, both to family members. He quit after realizing he couldn't handle rejection. Failure number 3. At 31, he tried to lose weight. He was 60 pounds overweight, pre-diabetic. He joined a gym, hired a trainer, committed to a diet, lost 35 pounds in 4 months. Then his father died suddenly. David fell apart, stopped going to the gym, ate his feelings, gained back all 35 pounds plus 15 more. Failure number 4. At 35, he tried to start a side business selling custom phone cases online. He'd read about passive income, watched tutorials, invested $3 in inventory, sold 47 cases total, lost all his investment. His wife never said, "I told you so," but her silence was worse. At 39, he tried to get promoted at work, applied for a senior adjuster position, studied, prepared, interviewed. They gave it to someone 10 years younger with half his experience. He stayed in the same job, the same cubicle, with the same title he'd had for 12 years. His wife Jennifer had stopped believing in his dreams. She never said it directly, but David could feel it. When he'd mention a new idea, she'd give him a tight smile and say, "That's nice, honey. Just make sure we can still pay the mortgage." His daughters barely knew he had ambitions. To them, he was just dad, the quiet one who worked a boring job and fell asleep on the couch, the one who wasn't exciting like mom, who saved lives at the hospital, at family gatherings. "What's new with you, David?" He had nothing to say. Same old, same old. Work's fine. Kids are good. Meanwhile, his younger brother owned a successful construction company. His college roommate had become a regional manager at a tech company. His neighbor had just sold his startup for $2 million. And David was still in the same place he'd been at 30, the same place he'd been at 35, the same place he'd be at 50 if nothing changed. The thought that tortured him every night as he lay awake at 2 a.m. was this: I'm 41 years old. I've failed at everything I've ever tried. Maybe I'm just not built for success. Maybe some people are winners, and I'm not one of them. There has to be something I'm missing, he thought. Some secret that successful people know that I don't. But what? What am I doing wrong? One cold Monday morning in January, David was sitting in his cubicle processing a claim for a kitchen fire when his phone rang. It was his mother. David, honey, I need to tell you something. Your Uncle Frank passed away last night. Heart attack, he was 68. David felt his chest tighten. Uncle Frank, his father's older brother. The family success story. Frank had owned a chain of auto repair shops. Retired at 60, spent his golden years traveling the world with his wife. David had always admired him from a distance but had never been particularly close. The funeral is Saturday, his mother continued. And David, Frank left something for you in his will. His attorney will be at the funeral. David hung up confused. Why would Uncle Frank leave him anything? They'd barely spoken in years. Saturday came. The funeral was packed. Over 300 people. Business partners, employees, friends from all over the country. Person after person stood up to share stories about Frank. Frank gave me my first job when I was 18 and had just gotten out of juvie. Nobody else would hire me. He saw something in me I didn't see in myself. Frank loaned me $10,000 to start my business when every bank turned me down. Never asked for it back. Said, pay it forward when you make it. Frank called me every year on my sobriety anniversary. For 22 years, never missed once. David sat in the back row, stunned. This was the same Uncle Frank who'd seemed quiet and unassuming at family dinners. After the service, Frank's attorney, an older man named Harold, pulled David aside. Frank wanted you to have this. He handed David a worn leather journal. He said to tell you, read this when you're ready to stop being afraid. David opened the journal. The first page, in Frank's neat handwriting, read, The Failure Journal, How I Failed My Way to Success. For David, when he's ready. That night, David sat alone in his garage. The one place he could have privacy. He opened the journal and started reading. The entries went back 45 years. June 1979. Age 23. Opened my first auto shop. Failed after 8 months. Lost everything. Living with mom and dad again. Feel like a complete loser. David's hands started shaking. That was exactly what had happened to him. Age 25. Tried to open a second shop. Failed after 6 months. Wife is angry. Says I'm irresponsible. Maybe she's right. March 1984. Age 28. Third shop. Brother won't speak to me. Says I'm an embarrassment to the family. Starting to believe him. David kept reading. Page after page of failures. 9 failed businesses, 2 bankruptcies, a divorce, depression, debt. But then, around page 50, the tone changed. There was an entry dated April 1989. Frank would have been 31. Met a man named Robert today at a business seminar. He asked me why I kept failing. I said I didn't know, that I must not be smart enough or lucky enough. He laughed and said, You're failing because you're learning the wrong lessons from failure. The entry continued. Robert told me something that hit me like a truck. He said, Every time you fail, you probably tell yourself a story. I'm not good enough. I'm unlucky. Success isn't for people like me. And then you carry that story into your next attempt, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're not failing because you're incapable. You're failing because you haven't learned how to fail correctly. David stopped reading. He read that paragraph again. You haven't learned how to fail correctly. The next entry explained what Robert had taught Frank. Robert gave me a system. He called it the failure framework. He said successful people fail just as much as unsuccessful people. The difference is what they do after the failure. He said I needed to make one decision. Stop running from my failures and start studying them. The entry outlined 3 questions Robert had told Frank to ask after every failure. 1. What specifically went wrong? Now I failed, I'm not good enough. What exact decisions or actions led to this outcome? 2. What was within my control? Not the economy, not bad luck, not other people. What did I personally do or not do? 3. What's the one thing I'll do differently next time? Not 10 things. One specific actionable change. Frank's entry continued. Robert made me go back through all my failures and answer these 3 questions for each one. It took me 3 weeks. It was painful. But by the end, I saw patterns I'd never noticed. I kept undercapitalizing. I kept hiring the wrong people because I was desperate instead of strategic. I kept giving up too early because I was afraid of losing more. These weren't random failures. They were the same failure, repeated, because I never stopped to learn from them. The next entry was dated May 1989. Today I made the decision that changed everything. I decided that I will fail again, probably many times. But I will never fail the same way twice. I will extract the lesson, adjust, and try again. I am no longer afraid of failure. I'm only afraid of wasted failure. Failure that teaches me nothing. David felt something crack open in his chest. He kept reading. The journal documented Frank's next attempt. Use the 3 questions. Capitalize properly. Hired slowly. Committed to 2 years minimum. Shop is still open after 1 year. First time that's happened. Shop 10 became Shop 11. Then 12. The journal showed Frank's methodical learning process. Every setback, he'd write out the 3 questions. Every success, he'd note what he'd done right so he could repeat it. By 1995, Frank owned 6 successful shops. By 2000, 12 shops. By 2005, he'd sold the chain for enough money to retire comfortably. The final entry in the journal was dated 3 months before Frank's death. I'm 68 now. I've lived a good life. Built something meaningful. Provided for my family. Helped a lot of people. But the real success wasn't the money or the business. It was learning that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the tuition you pay for success. I failed more than most people even try. And that's why I succeeded more than most people dream. I'm writing this for my nephew David because I see myself in him. Afraid, defeated, capable of so much more than he believes. David, if you're reading this, you haven't failed too many times. You just haven't learned from your failures yet. Make the decision. Start studying. One decision will change everything. David closed the journal. It was 11:30 p.m. He sat in his garage, surrounded by boxes of old phone cases from his 4th failure, looking at the journal in his hands. Tears streamed down his face, not from sadness, from recognition. Uncle Frank was right. David had failed 5 times, but he'd learned nothing. After the landscaping business failed, he told himself, I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship. After real estate, I can't handle rejection. After the weight loss, I have no willpower. After the phone case business, I'm not smart enough for online business. After the promotion, I'm not leadership material. 5 failures, 5 different stories, all the same message. I'm not enough. But what if that wasn't true? What if he'd just been asking the wrong questions? David opened the journal to a blank page in the back and wrote the date, January 14th. I'm going to stop running from my failures. I'm going to study them, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to try again. He spent the next 3 hours going through each of his 5 failures with the 3 questions Frank had outlined. Failure 1. The landscaping business. What specifically went wrong? We spent all our money on equipment before we had customers. We marketed poorly. We underpriced our services. What was within my control? Everything, the spending, the marketing, the pricing. What will I do differently? Never spend money before earning money. Test the market first. Failure 2. Real estate. What specifically went wrong? I quit after 18 months. I expected immediate success. I didn't follow up with leads consistently. What was within my control? My persistence, my systems, my mindset. What will I do differently? Commit to a minimum timeline. Build systems for consistency. He went through all 5 failures. And by 20:30 a.m., David saw something he'd never seen before. He hadn't failed because he was incapable. He'd failed because he kept making the same 3 mistakes. 1. He started with excitement but no plan. 2. He quit when things got hard. 3. He never analyzed what went wrong, so he repeated the same errors. These weren't character flaws. They were behavioral patterns. And patterns could be changed. David made a decision that night in his garage, holding Uncle Frank's journal. I will try again. I don't know what yet, but I will try. And when I fail, because I probably will, I won't run. I'll study. I'll adjust. I'll try again. I will fail differently each time until I succeed. He wrote one more thing in the journal, a commitment to his dead uncle and to himself. Uncle Frank, you failed 9 times before you succeeded. I've only failed 5. I'm just getting started. Day 1. David woke up Monday morning, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel defeated. He felt curious. He made a decision. He wasn't going to start another business yet. First, he was going to practice the failure framework on something smaller, something he'd failed at before. Weight loss. At 41, he was now 75 pounds overweight. He'd tried and failed at 31. But this time would be different. Not because he was more motivated, because he was going to apply the 3 questions. During his lunch break, David pulled out a notebook and wrote, "Weight loss failure at age 31. What went wrong specifically? I relied on motivation. When my dad died and I was grieving, I had no system to fall back on. I quit the gym. What was in my control? My preparation. I could have built habits, not just relied on willpower. What will I do differently? Build the smallest possible daily habit, something I can do even on my worst day." David didn't join a gym. He didn't hire a trainer. He didn't start a complicated diet. He made one tiny decision. Every day, before breakfast, he would do 10 push-ups. That's it. 10 push-ups. Even on his worst day, he could do 10 push-ups. It took 45 seconds. He started the next morning, 10 push-ups in his bedroom. They were hard. He could barely do them, but he did them. Day 2, 10 push-ups. Day 3, 10 push-ups. "What are you doing?" "Starting small," David said. "Learning to finish what I start." By day 14, the push-ups felt easier. He added one more tiny habit: drink water before coffee. 2 habits. Push-ups and water. 90 seconds total. Nothing dramatic. But he was doing them every day. Day 30. David had done push-ups for 30 consecutive days. His body was starting to change, just slightly. But more importantly, his mind was changing. He'd proven to himself that he could commit. He could follow through. At work, David started applying the failure framework to his job. He'd been passed over for promotion at age 39. What went wrong specifically? I assumed my experience was enough. I didn't build relationships with decision makers. I didn't document my achievements. What was in my control? My networking, my visibility, my initiative. What will I do differently? Schedule 1 coffee meeting per week with someone in leadership. Document my wins monthly. Volunteer for high visibility projects. David started having coffee with senior adjusters. Not to vis up, to be visible, to build relationships. He started tracking his work. Claims processed. Money saved the company. Customer satisfaction ratings. He volunteered to train new hires, something nobody wanted to do. It was extra work, but it made him visible. Day 60. David had lost 12 pounds, not from a diet, from consistency. Push-ups had become 20 push-ups. Water had become water, and a 10-minute walk. Small additions, sustainable. At work, his manager noticed. "David, you've been really engaged lately. What changed?" "I'm learning from my mistakes," David said honestly. His wife noticed too. One night at dinner, Jennifer looked at him. "You seem different, lighter. Not just physically. What's going on?" David showed her Uncle Frank's journal. He told her about the failure framework, about the decision he'd made. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I never stopped believing in you," she said quietly. "I just stopped believing you'd believe in yourself. I'm glad you're back." Day 90. 3 months after finding Uncle Frank's journal, David had lost 24 pounds. He'd built 4 small daily habits: push-ups, water, walking, planning his day. At work, his manager pulled him aside. "We're creating a new position, senior claims trainer. 20% raise. You'd train all new hires and develop our training program." David stared at him. "Why me?" "Because you've been doing it anyway, and you're good at it. The new hires you've trained have the highest retention rate and performance scores in the department." David accepted. It wasn't the promotion he'd wanted 2 years ago. It was better. It was earned through action, not assumption. Day 180. 6 months in, David had lost 43 pounds. The promotion had given him confidence. But more importantly, it had given him proof. Proof that when he applied the failure framework, when he studied his mistakes and adjusted, things changed. He decided it was time. Time to try something bigger. He was going to start a side business again. But this time, differently. He pulled out his notebook and reviewed his previous business failures: landscaping. Spent money before earning. Phone cases. No market research. No customer relationships. What would he do differently? This time, he'd start with no money. This time, he'd talk to customers first. This time, he'd commit to 1-year minimum, regardless of results. David had noticed something at work. Small businesses filing insurance claims often had no idea how to document losses properly. They'd lose thousands in reimbursements because their paperwork was incomplete. What if he helped them? He started small. Offered to help his neighbor, who owned a small restaurant, file a claim for water damage. Did it for free, just to test. The neighbor got $800,000 more than he expected. He told another business owner. That owner called David. David helped him, for free again. Word spread. By month 8, David had helped 12 small businesses with insurance claims. All for free. All to build relationships. Then he asked one question: would you have paid for this help? Every single one said yes. Month 9. David created a simple service: insurance claims consulting for small businesses. He didn't quit his job. He didn't invest thousands. He just started offering the service. $500 per claim, if he got the money. If not free. His first paying client was a bakery. He got them $12,000. They gladly paid $500. His second was a landscaping company. The irony wasn't lost on David. He got them $20,000. They paid $500 and referred 3 more businesses. By month 12, exactly 1 year after finding Uncle Frank's journal, David had served 31 paying clients. He'd earned it at $15,500 inside income. More importantly, he hadn't quit. Not when it was hard. Not when he was tired. He'd committed to 1 year, and he'd done it. Year 2. David's side business grew steadily. He was now earning $3,000 per month helping small businesses with insurance claims. He hired a part-time assistant. He created systems. He built a reputation. His weight had stabilized at 65 pounds lost. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be consistent. At his annual review at work, his boss gave him another promotion. Training director, another raise. But more than the title or money, David had something he'd never had before. Confidence. Not the fake confidence of someone who's never failed. The real confidence of someone who's failed, learned, and tried again. His daughters noticed. His oldest, Rachel, now 17, asked him one night, "What happened to you? You used to seem so defeated. Now you seem alive." David thought about how to answer. "I stopped being afraid of failing. I started being afraid of not learning from failure." Year 3. David's side business was earning more than his full-time job. He made a decision. He'd leave his job and go full-time with his consulting business. Jennifer was nervous but supportive. "You're different now," she said. "You're not running towards something hoping it works. You're building something knowing it will work, because you've already proven it can." David gave his notice. His boss was disappointed but understanding. "You've been an asset here, but I can see you're ready for something bigger." On his last day, David cleaned out his cubicle, the gray cubicle where he'd sat for 15 years. As he packed his box, he thought about Uncle Frank. 9 failures before success. David had failed 5 times. Then spent 3 years building. He wasn't a failure. He'd been in training. 5 years after finding Uncle Frank's journal, David's insurance consulting business was doing 400 Sauerhosen annually. He'd hired 3 employees. He'd helped over 500 small businesses recover more than $8 million in insurance claims. He'd paid off all his debt, bought a house, started a college fund for his daughters. But more than the money, David had transformed who he was. He'd lost 70 pounds and kept it off. He'd built a business from nothing. He'd earned his family's respect. He'd become the man he'd always known he could be, but had been too afraid to become. One morning, 5 years to the day after Uncle Frank's funeral, David sat in his home office and opened the leather journal. He turned to the last blank page and wrote, "Uncle Frank, you were right, I hadn't failed too many times. I just hadn't learned from my failures yet. I made the decision you told me to make. I stopped running. I started studying. 5 failures taught me everything I needed to know. Thank you for showing me that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the price of admission. I failed my way here, and I'd do it all again." My friend, David's story is your story. It's the story of anyone who's ever tried, failed, and thought, maybe success just isn't for me. Here's the truth that will change everything. You haven't failed too many times. You just haven't learned from your failures yet. Think about it. Every failure in your life, every business that didn't work, every goal you didn't hit, every time you quit, every time someone said no, those weren't wasted experiences. Those were lessons you paid for but never collected. Most people fail and immediately create a story. I'm not smart enough. I'm not lucky enough. Success isn't for people like me. And then they carry that story into their next attempt, guaranteeing the same result. But successful people, they fail just as much. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times before creating the light bulb. He said, "I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." That's the difference. He studied his failures. He extracted the lessons. He adjusted and tried again. So here's what I want you to do. Tonight before you go to bed, you're going to make the same decision David made. You're going to stop running from your failures and start studying them. Get a notebook. Write down your biggest failures, not to torture yourself, to learn from them. For each failure, answer 3 questions. 1, what specifically went wrong? Not vague answers like, "I failed," or "didn't work." Specific. Did you underprepare? Quit too early, ignore feedback, spend money recklessly, not ask for help? What exact actions or decisions led to the outcome? 2, what was within your control, not the economy, not bad luck? What did you personally do or not do? This is hard because it requires taking responsibility. But responsibility is power. If it was your fault, you can fix it. 3, what's one thing you'll do differently next time? Not 10 things. 1 specific, actionable change. Write it down. Be specific. For every major failure you've experienced, go through these 3 questions. You'll see patterns. The same mistakes repeated. And here's the beautiful thing about patterns. Once you see them, you can break them. Tomorrow, you're going to make 1 decision. You will try again. Maybe it's the same goal, maybe it's something new, but you will try. And when you fail again, because you probably will, you won't run. You won't create a story about not being good enough. You'll pull out your notebook, answer your 3 questions, adjust, and try again. You will fail differently each time, and eventually, you won't fail at all. You'll succeed. Not because you're lucky, because you learned. I promise you this. If you make this decision, if you commit to studying your failures instead of running from them, your life will transform. Not overnight. David took 3 years to build his business. But 3 years of learning is better than 30 years of repeating the same mistakes. You haven't failed too many times. You're just getting started. Every failure is tuition paid for the success that's coming. Uncle Frank failed 9 times. David failed 5. How many times have you failed? Good. You're learning. You're in training. You're getting closer. Your challenge is this. Write down your 3 biggest failures. Answer the 3 questions for each one. What went wrong specifically? What was in my control? What will I do differently? Then choose one thing to try again, one goal, one dream, one action. Commit to it for a minimum of 90 days and apply what you've learned. If you're ready to stop running from failure and start learning from it, if you're ready to fail your way to success, hit that like button right now as your commitment. I want to see those likes because each one represents someone choosing to try again. Drop a comment and tell me, what's one failure you're going to study? Share the story. Let's learn together. I'll be reading every comment because your failures are valuable. They're preparing you for something bigger. Share this video with someone who's given up, someone who thinks they've failed too many times, someone who needs to hear that their failures weren't wasted. They just haven't been studied yet. And subscribe to this channel because every week I bring you stories of people who transformed their lives not by avoiding failure, but by learning from it. Real people, real failures, real success. Remember David's final entry in Uncle Frank's journal. I failed my way here, and I do it all again. Your failures aren't ending your story. They're writing it. Stop running. Start studying. Try again. Your success is on the other side of the lessons you haven't learned yet. Make the decision today. Everything changes after that.